The future of relationships in a pandemic world. Chido Cleopatra Mpemba is the African Union's Special Envoy on Youth and the youngest diplomat in the chairperson's cabinet. Chido is an award-winning Pan-African youth advocate. Neema Iyer is an artist and technologist. She is the founder of Pollicy, a feminist civic technology collective based in Kampala, Uganda. Joy Des Fountain is founder at myFanPark Inc. She has 14 years experience as a CFO in both startups and corporates, from oil trading to marketing and telecommunications.
And with life under lock and key in several places around the world since 2020, when a very real virus made us all virtual, how did it affect relationships, be it between office colleagues, work-at-home couples, or children with their parents? More importantly, how has it affected our relationship with the self in an isolating world? This panel will explore the new neuron pathways and psychology of it all as we speak to brain scientists and a dispersed workforce untethered from the 9-to-5 routine and working asynchronously. How do we practice gratitude and develop a healthy growth mindset? Is it possible to break the glass ceiling when staring at a pile of laundry or leaky pipes? How to bring our authentic self to work in an autonomous environment? Welcome to my panelists. So to start off the conversation, Neema, I'd like to address my question to you. You work between two different countries, Germany and Uganda. How has the COVID-19 pandemic affected the way you do relationships?
That's such a good question. Thank you for asking me. So when I first conceptualized Pollicy as an organization, I always knew that I wanted it to be remote first. And at the time, this would have been 2017, there was very little acceptability about remote work. When I would try to schedule meetings online, there was, it was kind of unacceptable. And then the pandemic hit, and then all our lives were forced online. And I had plans of moving back and forth between the two countries, but to be honest, since 2020, I've only been back 3 times. But what really helped was that I built a remote first organization. So we already did a lot of our work online. I always wanted to have flexible work because I know how difficult it is, especially for women who have families. So that was really important to me as a founder, that we have flexible hours. So it didn't matter to me whether you were at the office at 7 or 9 or 12. That was always kind of the nature of the organization. So when the pandemic hit, there was actually very little change to the way that we did work, but I was very removed from my colleagues. And I think what has been really important is scheduling time to meet with people one-on-one, having those conversations. We use Slack as our primary platform, and making space to just have fun conversations, not always talking about work, trying to do fun team building activities every week so that you can see people as human beings, not just your colleagues that you always work with. And then one of the other things that we've done is we've moved to a 4-day work week. We started that this year because we also felt that just with everything going on in the world, that sometimes we just need a break. And so every Friday we have it off. We work from Monday to Thursday. And I think that has really helped with everyone's mental health. And I highly encourage other organizations to think of some version of this. It doesn't have to be every Friday. It could be 1 Friday a month. It could be some Fridays in the year. But I think it really has made a difference so that when people come back on Monday, it's just a really different energy. So for us, it required some of these changes. And the other thing that actually has been a positive with the pandemic is that we now have colleagues across Africa. So we have been able to employ remote staff at our organization. And there's many interesting things about culture that is more difficult to come out when you're in online spaces. And I'd love to talk about that more, but I'd like to give the floor over to my colleagues as well.
Thanks, Neema. And you've touched on so many interesting factors here. Well, firstly, the opportunity that exists to be able to hire across borders as a result of being more digital, but also the need for creating those human moments. I like that you called it space for fun, but it's not necessarily something that most organizations have been able to do, and it's not an easy thing to do. And I'm thinking specifically about Chido. Chido, is, if I understand correctly, you were newly appointed, joined the African Union in November members. So in the middle of COVID times, how was it for you joining a new team and having to build culture, interact with colleagues across the continent in a time where you can't really interact with them face to face as much as you normally would have?
Well, thanks for that. Well, I think for me, I was fortunate in that, we're in the middle of the pandemic and this was the second year. So it sort of built a culture already in terms of how to work remotely and how to work virtually. But I guess the challenge was, in working with a new team in terms of how you get to interact with your team, how you get to be part of that team and be inducted within a new office space. So that was a bit of a challenge initially. But the fortunate thing was that, given the culture that was already there in terms of working virtually and working remotely, it was so much easier in terms of using those platforms to interact and to talk to my new colleagues, as well as to connect within, that space and my new employer. And not only that, but I found that, when you open channels in terms of chatting informally, it also helps in terms of, building those relationships internally within the workplace. So, I also opened up myself to ensure that, in as much as everything was interacted through, Zoom as usual and, having emails exchanged, but, I was open to also share in terms of my contact details. Everyone is usually on WhatsApp and, take conversations off, that formal route, but, more informally, which also helped me to, to get to understand my colleagues, because I believe that it's very important as well, when you're within the working space, that, it goes beyond being transactional, work related, but you build relations as well. So that really, really helped because, we managed to have those conversations, within those informal platforms and also had space where, would interact and talk, have, socials virtually as well. So for example, we'd have coffee chats. I'll talk to some of my colleagues and, would organize to have virtual coffee meets, Friday wine. And, you just meet and you talk within that channel and create that environment, where you're able to, fully get to understand and fully get to know each other, before you physically get into the office. So, I'm actually still working virtually at the moment, as I'm finalizing and relocating to my duty station and the chairperson's office. But this has really helped me in terms of, using those platforms that are available. Not only that, but making sure that, we're also open to have those informal conversations and, build those work bonds, outside that formal channel and, the exchanges of the emails. So that has been really, really helpful for me. Although I must admit that it was a challenge in the beginning, because there's so much going on at once. We're in the middle of a pandemic. There's a lot going on as well in between everything as well at the time in Ethiopia. So, just, being able to get myself involved in the work was in the middle of all these challenges. But, trying to find a way that, I also get to know my colleagues and, we get to talk, we get to interact within the space and, the challenges that we're faced with, at that time. Not only that, but I think it's also important to understand, once you're in the workplace, it's very important to understand in terms of everything that will be going on around you. For example, we have the pandemic, and I believe this affected a lot of people individually. It affected people within their families. Some people had COVID, some people lost family members during this time, and there's a lot going on mentally. So, being able to be accommodative of one another and, having that understanding that, in as much as, I might need information or reach out to a colleague, but, if they're not able to respond instantly, but understanding and just, being empathetic towards one another to say in as much as, we have our deliverables and have work that we need to do, but as humans, how can we also be understanding? How can we connect in this world? And, how can we just, make what we can out of the situation, with the challenges that we're faced with during the time and that we're getting out of now.
Yeah, I guess, and that's an important factor as well, is that as much as it's moved us into this virtual world, we also experienced a huge thing at the same time where we can relate. I think for the first time probably in our lifetime, we can relate to somebody that is completely on the other side of the world as we're living the same thing. We're all in lockdown. We're all experiencing having to move our world into the digital space. And what I really like about what you're saying, Chido, as well, is that you're basically touching on the fact that we've also had to defragmentize our lives, that what was once a work tool is no longer just a work tool. And I actually remember remember comments coming through a few years ago where people started saying, since when did WhatsApp become a work thing? Why are people sending me WhatsApps instead of emails? And now it's very much the norm. And speaking about WhatsApp and business, actually, I'd like to ask you, Joy. So we see also that lockdown, COVID-19, brought about business opportunities. Now, you have a very interesting business in the sense that your business actually helps create interactions between, I want to say, everyday citizens and celebrities. So where, for example, somebody can get a shout out from Sia Kolisa for their birthday. Now, what's quite interesting about your business is that you came at a pretty impeccable timing, I want to say, just before the COVID-19 pandemic. How has the business evolved, and what have you noticed in terms of how the platform is being used?
Thanks so much for having me. And you're right. When we launched myFanPark, the goal was to connect people with those they admire in a far more authentic way, outside of what social media does in the world, with the view of bringing experiences to life. So just as you've said, whether it be video messages or question and answers or Zoom calls for masterclasses, etc. Little did we know when we launched at the end of 2019 that 2020 would come. And I thank my lucky stars still to this day that we had kind of launched a business, founded a business that was digital first, and got our teeth stuck into it before lockdowns, etc. But what we have found is naturally, we launched in 2019, we went into 2020, and lockdowns happened. We were forced to live with people that we chose, but more often than not didn't want to spend that much time with them. And depending on kind of the day and how homeschooling was going and who was doing the laundry and the dishes and everything. And so what people were doing is had a desire to connect with others. We're playing in a world which is celebrity as such, but actually it's something that's incredibly exciting called the creator economy. And myFanPark plays at the intersection of the creator economy and the digital economy, both of which are incredibly fast moving. And as the two ladies on the previous panel spoke about, what the creator economy has done is take people with skill sets and allow them to be able to create community and monetize online. And so as the pandemic hit and myFanPark existed, we found that whilst we initially were for kind of what we believe to be admired talent, as you might see celebrities, etc., we pivoted very quickly into the creator space, which is far broader, allowing people that have a skill set to be able to connect, engage, and monetize online. So whether it be an artist who has to this point only ever kind of sold their artwork out of a studio, to now being able to take that artwork to a global audience and be able to understand that in the world there are so many different tools to use. Africa, unfortunately, is not nearly as supported as we need it to be, and that's mine and my team's huge focus as we aim to build out myFanPark, is to take our technology and our understanding of the space to more creators who have the ability to then connect with their audiences around the world and be able to monetize it in a far more meaningful way.
And Joe, you've brought about such an important aspect to this conversation, the move towards a creator economy, a digital economy, and I want to add to that as well, the gig economy, especially when we look to the continent that we live in, where we have youth unemployment that is growing at an incredible pace, where we need more jobs, we need to create more jobs, create more opportunities for the youth. And Chido, that's your area. So in light of the creator economy, the gig economy, and the move towards this digital economy, where are the biggest opportunities for youth in terms of the new way in which we do things?
Okay, I think the biggest opportunities for youth in terms of the new way that we do things is within the innovation space. I mean, young people are very innovative. And, we have a lot of platforms that are being created for them to innovate, for them to share their ideas. I'll give an example. When I got appointed into this role, I mean, I moved in one day from having one message to 2,700 messages, and I took some time to go through some of those messages. And this was just young people with a lot of ideas, just sharing the one wonderful work that they're doing across the continent. So I believe this is an opportunity for young people in terms of the way they innovate and, having their platform where they get to, change the way Africa is viewed, as well as, advancing Africa. I mean, we have the largest population in Africa being the young people. So, in terms of how we harness those skills that they bring, I would admit that there's still challenges that are faced with that in terms of, is there capacity, being built for young people to be able to innovate, to be able to have the space that they require in terms, to be fully utilized in terms of the digital economy. And I think that's where it comes in with regards to, how we can collaborate and partner with the private sector, with member states, and international organizations and, local organizations at national level in terms of, how we harness the strength that young people bring and, make sure that the opportunities that are available for them reach out to everyone and, including the marginalized communities, youth with disabilities, youth in non-urban areas, but making sure that, it's inclusive of everyone. And I believe that the opportunities are available and, it's such a great space for young people, given that we're the largest population on the continent. Not only that, but given that we're very innovative and there's so many examples of young people in terms of the amazing work they're doing, not only on the continent, but, work that has, reached global level as well. So, it is the time and definitely it's an opportunity for young people to innovate and, to get the support that they need on the continent.
Yeah, and you raised some really interesting points that actually link back to the conversation that was had just before, in the fact that now young people have access to more jobs, that we have a workforce that is skilled, that can basically work across borders. And I want to bring my next question to Neema. Your business Pollicy, and I was reading this and I was quite interested. You write on your website that you are a collective of technologists, data scientists, creators and academics working at the intersection of data design and technology to craft better life experiences by harnessing data. Now, what exactly are the opportunities that harnessing data offer us?
Thank you so much for that question. There are a ton of opportunities in terms of the need to collect data, to analyze it, to process it. Right now, MozFest is going on. It's a festival by Mozilla, and we're talking all about artificial intelligence. And there's just a very big gap. There's a very big gap in the skill sets, especially when it comes to using data in terms of, collecting it, storing it, saving it, using it. There are so many business models that can be built on data, but we also need to thinking about being ethical about those kinds of businesses. And one of the things that comes up, as my previous colleague mentioned about jobs in Africa, is that we actually struggle to find people to fill these kinds of positions. There are just so many opportunities. And as a founder, it really, really pains me to have a struggle in finding staff to work in these fields when there are just the opportunities, they're growing, there's so much potential, there's so many ways that, we haven't even dreamed about the jobs of the next 5 to 10 years. And now so much of our lives have moved online. You can work across borders, there's nothing stopping you. And so when I just think about how much opportunity we can have, it's mind-blowing. And for me, it's a really, really exciting space. So think about how many people across Africa are moving to online spaces, both in education, in work, in pleasure, in everything. Think about how big that opportunity is. We need to think about making sure that digital spaces are safe. So a big part of our work is making sure that women feel safe in online spaces, because there's already a big digital gender divide. You don't want more women leaving digital spaces when our lives are digital right now. So what about the work in making sure that the internet is affordable, that the space are safe, don't feel like they have to self-censor, where they're not attacked by trolling or hacking, for example. So for us, the topic of imagining what our digital future in Africa looks like is just massive. And it's really exciting work. And I just can't wait to see more people getting involved. Over the past 2 years, I would have hoped that I would see more, but I haven't, for many different reasons, in that the pandemic slowed things down. It made economic challenges. People struggled to even afford basic access to the internet. So I'm really hoping, I'm excited to see conversations about the metaverse. I myself am an artist. I dabbled in NFTs last year. It was really exciting to see how much progress digital artists across Africa made. So when I say my work is at the intersection of data design and technology, it is just such an exciting space, and I cannot wait to see the kind of progress we're going to make.
Indeed, and as you mentioned, COVID did slow certain things down, but it also did accelerate quite a bit. But it seems that now we're really turning a page on the COVID era, at least we hope we are. And so, Joy, my question to you now is, with everything that we've talked about right now, the creator economy, the digital economy, the gig economy, and basically the business model that you've developed now, where do you see the opportunities in terms of creating relationships, interacting with people digitally, and how we do relationships?
So, gosh, if we go back to 2 years ago, and we think about how we all started, really, COVID forced us to live closer together with some people and further apart from others. And really, life in lockdown necessitated close, constant contact with our families and our partners. But social distancing measures have isolated us from our friends, from our colleagues, and really from our wider communities. And often, I know certainly as a woman and as a mom, I certainly feel like on most days that women ended up shouldering a greater burden, given typically the kind of perhaps unequal divisions in household in terms of labor and responsibilities, etc. Then you couple that with problems that have already existed pre-COVID, and you've really got these aggravated tensions. And I think a lot of our coping mechanisms pre-COVID were to rely on support systems, relationships that were already in place, whether it be friends, family, wider communities. For some people, it was their colleagues that they saw every day, the ability to go for a coffee, to have lunch together over a lunch break, to run to the gym quickly. And then all of a sudden, COVID came and people were cut off from their regular coping mechanisms. So that's less about the interaction going forward, just about the reality of what all of us, to one degree or another, have had to face over the last 2 years. So as a result of that, all of us have had to change our approach and equally understand different ways of connecting. That's why we're on a Zoom call right now, whether it be FaceTime or Zoom or messaging or WhatsApp, and many have moved to social media. Naturally, the gig economy and the incredible generation of youth in Africa has moved a lot to social media, which has come with great positives as well as a few negatives. I know that research has often shown that because of the increased usage in social media, it's actually leaving young people feeling more lonely and isolated. So we're at an interesting place now where we've got to take the learnings over the last 2 years, of which there are a lot. I don't know, if COVID didn't happen, would we be having metaverse conversations? Would we be having Web3 conversations? Who knows? But our reality has changed so much now. And what we've got to do is, number one, look and understand what people need. So reaching out and kind of, I think, equally on top of what it's shown us, it's taught us, certainly, I think in my experience, a different level of humanity and empathy. As you started, for the first time in certainly our lives, everyone in the world was in the same position in terms of being impacted by a global pandemic. Naturally, our circumstances are all different, but you could speak to someone, whether you were here in Cape Town in South Africa, in Silicon Valley, in Lagos, in God forbid, Wuhan, China, and people were in lockdown. And so what did it do? It made the world so much smaller, but equally disconnected in so many ways. So where we're sitting now in terms of jobs, in terms of just normal relationships, is trying to figure out what that new normal is in terms of what people need to connect. And then on top of that, looking at how business has changed over the last 2 years and understanding that there's been so much digital transformation that's happened. I mean, we are literally having panels talk about the metaverse and AI and being able to sell digital art, etc. So we're in such an exciting place, but I think so much of it comes down to one thing: the value of solid relationships, the value of showing empathy, the value of showing that you care, the value of not trying to put a facade, saying like, I have kids that run on Zoom calls and not being ashamed of that. And I often will say to my team, like, I'm so sorry, I have a 2-year-old that runs on a Zoom call, and they're like, Joy, don't apologize. We're all in this situation together. And quite frankly, it's made all of us human. And I think that that's a really huge benefit that's come as a result of this, is the humanity that has been shown towards families, towards friends, towards colleagues, as we've navigated something, as we've got through it, and now as we're in a critical place of understanding what life is going to be post that, how the learnings, whether they have been desired learnings or forced learnings, have impacted us over the last 2 years, and what of those we are going to take going into the future as we figure out what our new normal is.
That is such what I'm hearing from what you're saying, and how I would like to actually summarize this panel is the future of relationships in a pandemic world is humanity. I'm really getting from all three of your interactions that we've moved towards being more human, being more understanding, being more open and vulnerable in our interactions with one another. So I'd like to thank you all, my panelists. Thank you, Neema, thank you, Chido, and thank you, Joy, for joining us today. It was a pleasure discussing this with you, and I wish you all the very best going forward.